All right, this is the tutorial on how to start modeling your vehicle after you have created the shoebox garage. I have in front of me a shoebox garage, not the same car from the tutorial. But you can see it's a DeLorean. And I've got the back view, front view, top view, side view. So the first thing I want to introduce people to is a new method to actually draw polygonal objects. We've done so with extrusions of basic geometric forms using create and then going down to polygon primitives. And we've created a lot of these and we've done a lot of extrusions. But the next thing I want to do is to show people that you can actually now create polygons. And that will be under the mesh tools. This is in the modeling mode in Maya. Under mesh tools, it's the fifth one down called create polygon. Create polygon is pretty much exactly what you think it would be. You are allowed to, once you see your cursor change to the crosshairs, you are allowed to draw, literally, if you make 5 points on the screen, and then press enter, you've just made one polygon. And if you press Y, you go right back to the previously used tool. You press Q, you go to select, and then if you press Y on your keyboard, you go to the last tool. And I'm now going to draw another polygon, but this time I'm going to go counterclockwise. Enter. Now these are colored differently because when you draw polygons, and I did so in the orthographic view because it flattens it out to that plane. You try doing it in perspective, it might flatten it on the grid. It's because the normals are only drawn, and I'll turn this on here for backface culling. The normals are only drawn on the side that is facing the camera. In this view, you can see that, I'll select them both. So you can see that the one that we drew counterclockwise puts the normal facing towards the camera where you are. And if you draw clockwise, it will actually draw it so that the normals are facing away from you. And this makes a difference because if you were to draw a side of the car, which we are going to do here, and then we're going to extrude it, we want to make sure that we're going to be extruding something where we can actually see the sides. Because if we extrude something, extrude first in this direction, see, that looks just fine. There's no real problems there. But if we grab this one, grab the edges all the way around, and we go to extrusions again, and you extrude, then it's gonna be problematic because now you've made an extrusion that actually is still drawing only the insides. And this is really kind of messed up to look at because you're convinced if you're in wireframe mode, those things look pretty much the same. Those are two extrusions of drawn faces. But when you go into shaded mode, you'll see that no, only one of them has the normals facing outside all the exterior. And the rest of the normals here are all facing interior, and it looks really bad. Maya, of course, does not show you this by default. I'm only shown that by going to the interior drop-down menu and shading and turning on backface culling. But that's not a bad policy, just to make sure you're aware that you're drawing things in the right direction. So the drawing of polygons is pretty cool, but you need to make sure that you are always drawing it in the right direction. So we're going to go into X-ray mode here, same place as we were doing backface culling a minute ago, only it's a different section of the menu. X-ray sort of does not make this does not sort of take something that's completely opaque and makes it semi-transparent, including the polygons that you've affixed the drawings to. So in this case now, I've got, if I were to go, and by the way, this is only per window, which is why it's not manifesting itself here, but is manifesting itself in the side as well as the front, because I turned it on in those windows. If I were to turn it on here, X-ray, this would do as well. And this allows you to get kind of a nice view of all the different views. Because it doesn't draw both sides, if you want this front to be drawn from this view, you can simply go into the rotate and give it the 180 degree value rotation and move it if you need to. But it's a good way to because I moved the pivot point down there in the center, or the corner. It's a good way to flip this around so you can see the image. If you want to take the pivot point and put it back to the center of anything, use Modify Center Pivot. And now if you were to go and type in -90 here, boom, it pretty much stays in place. And that'll stay in place, that'll stay in place, that'll stay in place. So it's all pretty good. I can type in a 180 version value for any of these sides. I can, of course, snap these to one side or the other if it's how I want. But let's start drawing the side of this car. And we'll do so in a counterclockwise manner so that the normals are facing us. And the way that you want to make sure that you draw these polygons is just hitting the basic points of the car that are extreme enough to warrant a significant change in direction. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like, if you're coming in here and you're clicking this 5 or 6 times, you're wasting your time. Every single point that you dictate on this car, you will have to resolve that as a triangular or quadrangular polygon. So it is not to your advantage at all for you to sit here and click and try and get the exact curvature of something like a firewall, the side of the tires here, because although this looks pretty, the other half of the assignment is that you have to make this in as few polys as possible. So I'm intentionally going overboard here with the size and the shape, not the size but the shape of everything, because although that looks pretty cool, look at all these vertexes now that I have to resolve, because this is a, what it was like 20 points or so, a 20-sided polygon. And so that means I've got to split each of these vertices into a triangle. And while you can come up and under the mesh tools, you can use the multi-cut tool and say, okay, I'll cut that one from here to here, I suppose, and then it'll come up here, and that's one triangle. I have to do that for all these other points, and it's going to get incredibly messy if I'm sitting here chopping these things up and saying, oh, that's still got 5 points, so now I'm going to grab that and kind of split it over here. So this is already kind of a headache, and really not the point of the project. This is to be done in as few polys as possible, not as accurately as possible, because the end result of this is that you're going to look at this car from about this distance. So getting an exacting curvature on something that's round is really not the point. In fact, it works against you, because you simply want to go in and draw the polygons and get to the other parts of this modeling. But if you add too many points, that's going to have serious ramifications for you in the future when you continue modeling. So I'm going to first of all just kind of cut the bottom. And for this this firewall, the tire here, I'm just going to use I got like 6 points, 5 points. That's it. That's all I need. Do I need to even model this slight bump here? No. I'm going to ignore that. I do, however, need to have a slanted back roof, a rather horizontal top roof, and a slanted windshield. That's enough to warrant the changes. But even in the front, I'm going to disregard that bumper. It's not necessary to see it at that distance. Now, I'm faced with a problem. I can't see exactly where this firewall is. That's okay, because I know it needs about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. So I'm going to come in here and click 1, 2, 3, 4. I did it in 4. As few polygons as possible. Now I come here to the vertices, grab each one, and lift it up and out to kind of approximate where I really needed it. So drawing them is okay, knowing that you can adjust where those points are in the future, or back to the future. So we've got this thing selected here, and it pretty much approximates the overall shape. Again, the overall shape. This is not about high poly modeling. This is not about adding so many points that you then are going to be spending your time trying to figure out how to use them. It's about just hitting the basic outline. And it works. And we have fewer amount of vertices to deal with now. So one of the things you're going to want to get into is, of course, the multi-cut tool under Mesh Tools, because you're going to start kind of cutting this car up. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you were to look at the basic shape of a car from each of the views, we've nailed the side view. That's pretty cool. But look at all these other views. It doesn't make any sense. It's sort of a flat polygon, and it doesn't really match any of the other views. Not top, not front, not side. Maybe we'll get something to play with the extrusion. That's fair. But most of the cars have a shape that is like so. I'm just going to quickly duplicate this to emulate two polygons. And combine them and grab these middle ring of vertices and merge. 0.1. There we go. So merge those all together really quickly. So I've now got this kind of I've now got this box. I'm going to scale this down. Could have done that in probably much faster in several different ways. But the basic look of a car from the side is unique in its silhouette. But from the front and the back, let's go to orthographic view to really emphasize my point here. The side of this car, you can see that up here where the passengers sit, even if you were to draw this straight, which is not necessarily true, but if, again, we were to approximate things, we can leave that sort of straight. When you get into a car, the passenger window and the driver window is actually quite angled. Not so much like this box, but rather like this. And if we want to attain this shape, which was easy to do with this particular cube, it's because I was allowed to just grab the upper vertices and scale them in, because I had a hinge here. Let me show you what I mean. The only reason that I was able to pinch this in to start looking more like the back of the DeLorean is because I had these edges. Because if you look at just the polygon of the side of the window, I'll take off the X-ray here. If you look at pretty much this face and this face, the only way that I was able to bend this one that emulates the passenger side window is because I had this edge. And that allowed me to have a hinge. So if we're going to take this more complex shape and bend in the windows, we need to have a hinge kind of in the same place that you see this edge right here. And since one does not naturally exist because we've drawn the silhouette, we need to put one in there. So with that, let's move this out to the side. Let's go to the side view or front view, since I've apparently drawn this at an angle, and come up to the mesh tools and go down to multi-cut and do what I was doing earlier, only this time we're going to grab this point, which is the meeting place between the front windshield and the hood, click on it, drag all the way here to the back at about the point where you can see, let's just compensate for the window, and it snapped it to the edge here. That's fine. It may not be perfect, but it's fine. How do I then move in the side of this car? Well, I've grabbed the top edge and going to the front view, side view. That's gonna be a challenge. So I've grabbed this edge here just so you can see what I'm doing. And that edge, I think that'll be better if I turn off X-ray for a minute. So I grabbed the top edge of this plane, and now popping to the front view of the car here, I can move it so that it kind of matches the angle I'm going for here. This also gives us a good chance to go to object mode. Grab that. By the way, that was very easy to grab, because what it did not do is it grabbed these polygon layers. I'm just going to move this out to where it actually belongs, which is kind of the side of the car. So I'm lining up this straight bit here, obviously where there's more of a curve, but for the time being, I don't really care. Again, this is about approximation. So if I were to grab, if I want to go back and grab that edge here, and then pull it over, that's pretty close. Pretty close indeed. Now I'm working from the other side. It doesn't really matter which side you're working from, but I do have to be very aware of which way I've drawn this in. Because I've said let's draw this in counterclockwise, my normals are going to currently be facing me, but the way I have this set up means I'm going to be extruding this way, so I have to fix that. Let me show you. If I come into backface culling, can't see that character at all. You can't see that silhouette because, let me turn these off, because it's drawn to be seen from this angle, which means the extrusion should be going this way. And if I want to keep it consistent, let's say I want to actually pull it the other way, extrude it the other direction, that's fine. I'll bring it out towards me on the other side of the car. On this side here, and grabbing the top edge again, I'm going to move to about there. Cool. Maybe up a bit. All right. So if I go back to object mode, here we are. Now I'm ready to extrude in the direction that I want. So come up to edit mesh and go down to extrude, and do not choose any of these initial arrows that are following the normals. Instead press W or go here to translate and pull along this direction, this axis. Now I'm not going to bring it all the way to the other side because I really only want to make half the car. Because as we model half this car, we will eventually be able to mirror it to the other side. It actually saves a lot of wear and tear on the author or the modeler because we're not having to build two sides of the car at the same time. However, the fact that this keeps that same sort of concave setup that worked as an exterior but is not working as a midpoint to the car means we need to flatten that out. And that's best done since it's selected as a face using scaling. And then we just scale it in one axis like so. We're effectively flattening it out. And then I can translate it to about the center of the car. And then because it's the face itself that's selected, just press delete. There. So can anybody identify what's wrong with this car? This has the normals in the wrong direction. Ay. That's okay. Go to object mode if you have anything like this, and just go up to mesh display and pop down to normals reverse, and it'll reverse the whole of it. And right now is a really good time to check your work. So make sure you pop on backface culling. As you can see, things can get away from you pretty quickly. However, we have not only a growing list of history here, we also have a car that's starting to look a little bit more like the DeLorean that we want. So every time we want to make a bend like this window here, we want to put a hinge to allow us to do that, like this edge right here. That allows that surface to stay fairly planar, not perfectly planar, but fairly planar. So when we want to take the on the top mode, when we want to take a look at the top of the car, notice that things stop being boxy and they actually get a little sharper. So if we were to put a hinge here, we could actually taper in the back and taper the front of this car, which makes sense. So right about this grid line here, or right about at the same line I notice as the top roof of the car, is pretty much what we want to aim for to put a hinge there. So right along where this line is of the passenger door and the driver door. So same mesh, we're back to it. Edit mesh, mesh tools, come down to multi-cut, and now I'm going to make a cut from here all the way to the bottom. Boom. Only it's not going to let me do that because I held down the shift key. When you hold down the shift key, it actually splits the edge in perfect half. So make sure that you do not hold down the shift key if you're just arbitrarily choosing a point. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. There's also a tapering that needs to happen from about, let's say, the wheel line right here. And so that gives me good reason to put a split right about here. I can split that polygon, and that's resolved. What do I mean by resolved? Well, that means that this polygon is slowly becoming from a 5-sided polygon. Now I've got a quad. This is a 4-sided polygon right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is a 4-sided polygon. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's easily resolved. Look at the pain it would have been for us to add all these points along the wheel well initially, and then we'd have to resolve it. That's extremely irritating if you're just trying to model the thing. So another process I like to do is sort of follow the line of the car door. You don't have to do that, but I'm going to split this down even further for the sole purpose that it allows me to take these last polygons and resolve them. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've resolved all the front of this, and notice that each of the polygons are fairly similar in their size. There's not a bunch of little polygons here, and suddenly there's bigger, longer ones. And this cuts things into bite-sized chunks. I don't think it's a good policy to have these long, jagged polygons cutting the side of this in a zigzag form. It's actually better to do so in much smaller cuts. So this allows me to grab this, and I'm going to make a leap up here. That's now a quad, and I can cut, let's see, I can cut this to the same location. That's now a triangle. And I can cut that corner over here to the back. This is now a quad, and finally just cut that. So this is now a triangle here. We have some smaller polygons now, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I may want to cut this further from the top to the bottom because I don't like this huge open polygon. So let's just do that by choosing this point and then going to here to the bottom. Bam. So now we have a couple more hinges we can use if we want to, but still the car is, pretty basic. Look at how few polygons that car has. What we do need to do is resolve the things we've cut. So all these other lines I already moved to existing points on the side, save for this one here. These other lines that I drew had existing points, which meant they already had sort of their polygon equivalents up here on the roof. Let me turn off all the templates again. So when I drew this line here, it went to an existing point, which meant it already had a line cutting across the top. And that's true for most of these, which was, nice and painless for me because I didn't have to resolve them, except for this bit right here. Because I cut into this polygon, and this polygon, even though it looks like a quad because it's got 4 sides, in fact reveals itself to be a 5-sided polygon. Remember, an n-gon, n meaning any number higher than 4. And n-gon is rather illegal in Maya. So what I can do is one of two things to split this up. There's one edge, 2, 3, 4, 5, n-gon. So I can grab this and I can either pop it over here to the top or just go all the way across, which I think is fine because it just gives me more to play with. Okay, it's going to be, of course, argumentative with me. So I'm going to switch to a view that it does not hopefully fight so much. And if it continues, what you can do is just choose the face and come in and say Mesh Tools, multi-cut. And sometimes it has a better time digesting just the selected face rather than the entire object, even though you're dealing with kind of a polygon by polygon method. So now we've got this. You need to absolutely save your work. Save scene as. DeLorean template. Let's go here to shoebox. No, we're actually modeling this at this point. Modeling_1. And I will spell it with proper camel case. So there we are. And while it's saving, I'll turn back on the other templates. And because we put in these hinges, we are now able to grab the vertices of the side here and pull them in to taper the ends of the car. And we do that by going to the proper view, turning on shading, X-ray. Now things are kind of lining up already. And in the translation mode, I'm going to move it only in one axis, this one. So you see I'm matching that taper ever so slightly. And I'm allowed to do the same thing with the back. Match that taper. And again, we're getting more and more of a DeLorean shape, because what we're doing is best done with as few points as possible. It actually eases the modeling for you to have fewer points to kind of corral than to have this huge beast that you're modeling. And I've seen people make these mistakes time and time again where they start out with an absolute nightmare of polygon points just because they think the assignment is to make as close to a circle as possible. The assignment is to model this in as few polygons as possible. So choose the ones that dictate a serious change in the shape of the car's geometry, and you'll go along much, much farther. And the reason we want to do this is, although this is not sorted out in any way, one of the advantages to doing this sort of, modeling half of something instead of the whole is because once this is duplicated, once I duplicate this geometry using the mirror geometry, those UVs on the other side, the left side of the car, is going to be laid right over the right side of the car, and it's going to be something that I can model texture much faster. So at this point, with you saving your work as you've done, you may want to take a moment and come in and kind of delete all the history, because look at all the history here on the right that we've built up on this poor model. And so if you delete all by type history, that goes away. You have a slightly cleaner model. And you also want to go in and grab certain edges, like the firewall here. Let's see how many points that grabbed. It grabbed ones I don't want, which is the problem with the automated. That seemed to grab the ones I want. Okay, just the firewall there. And that side. I think it's the tire wall, not the firewall. The firewall is something that you want to use with software. Anyway, so come up here to Mesh Display and go down to Harden the Edge, because that actually changes the normals. And remember that the normals have problems in Maya when it's a change of more than 90 degrees. So ostensibly you could use the same trick here for this edge all along the side of the car. And that's because the DeLorean has a known sort of sharp edge to it. So I'm going to use this to my advantage by creating the same sort of hard lines and hard edges. Let's do it on the bottom as well. And the minute that I dictate that all these should be hard edges, it'll help Maya ever so slightly to calculate these other shapes and make them nice and smooth. That's slightly better, I think. So using the same principle that I just showed regarding Windows and the UV editor, you model one half of it. When you duplicate it, the UVs of the duplicate lie right on top of the same space. So you're able to texture two things at once. By virtue of that as well is the reason that I avoided modeling the tires. Because when you create the tires separately, which I'm going to be doing here with a cylinder, polygon primitive cylinder, every time once I UV texture these tires, every time I duplicate them 4 times on all sides of the car, they will lay right on top of each other's UVs. And so I basically get to texture one tire, several tires from one. However, this is extremely big. We don't need it either that scale that big, and those subdivisions are absurd. Knock this down to about 8 because I know that I had a tire wall that was about 4, I believe, points, and we'll try to just match that against this. Looks kind of the same. Let's rotate it in place so that it matches or tries to match the little divots I made. Great. Scale it up. At this time, I want to bring in the templates so I can see what I'm doing. All right. And you can see that although it looks like a stop sign, it really is not as complex as you might think it needs to be. It in fact is a perfect shape for us. And when I duplicate this, well, actually, I haven't sorted out the UVs yet, so I don't need to duplicate it. But from the side, we've sorted it out. Let's do it here from the front. Yeah, you can see that I have grabbed the tire. Let's make sure it's not 87 degrees, but 90. And I've sorted it from the side view. Now I want to sort it from the front. And I forgot actually which angle I'm going. Okay, good deal. So look now, even at this point, just nuke that. Even at this point, we're getting closer and closer to this car. And we really haven't used a lot of geometry. The point is to not try and finish this all in one fell swoop. The point is at this point, you're ready to texture this. So there you are. If you have any questions, let me know. Other than that, happy modeling with your unique chosen car.